What we're now going to take a look at is web fonts. And my original design for my web page is on the left-hand side here. And this is the PSD design layout file. And it's simply a copy of the design that's been finalized for my web page. Now, what I have done from this particular design is put into a style guide the information for what is contained in each area of this web page. So in other words, in my header section, I have the logo image as the header. I have a search box, and within my search box, I have a form element, which is this box here, and I actually have a button. Now the search text, in other words, the text within this box is what's listed over here. So my style guide contains the name of the different areas of the page. Now these may not be the exact names we're going to use when we get to a web page, because some of these will need to be altered so they make a little more sense. So I just named them in my style guide once I had my graphic design finalized. So in the header, I have those two pieces. My search text, in other words, the text that's showing the word search, is Minion Pro font, 14 point in size. So I'm listing the exact fonts and sizes and colors from my design here. The navigation bar has a background color. This blue is this particular color in hex value, this color right here. The font is Myriad Pro. It's bold, 14 point. I have white text with a white pipe. The pipe is this vertical line right here between the text. And I also documented the fact that this has a drop shadow attached to that blue color, and I put the details of the drop shadow. So you can think of the style guide as a document that lists all the different settings within your graphics program. So instead of in Photoshop or Photoshop Elements going out to the layer, clicking the layer to learn everything, I have it in a single document. Now what I need to do in order to determine what to do about the web fonts is take the fonts that are listed here and decide how I'm going to go about displaying that particular font. And if I can't display that particular font on the web, what do I do about it? So let's start up in the header section, because this is a good example. This is a particular font. Notice my header area doesn't talk about the font for the actual logo. That's because it's a special font. Now, if you have a special font with special colors, borders, and outlines, this is not a font you can create from the web side of things. So what I need to do is set up this as an image. That way, however this font looks right now in my graphic design, it will look identical on the web page. Some of these other fonts we may need to adjust a little bit in order to make them worthwhile and usable for our website. And one of the pieces in looking at the web font is what are the fonts that operate on any user's system? And there's 5 or 6 of them. They're very basic. In Dreamweaver, once we move this into a web page, Dreamweaver has those fonts listed very nicely. So we need to determine once we get to the Dreamweaver side, what are we going to do about a font? People will not have Minion Pro on their system for this search box. So what do I do about the word search? Do I want my web page to actually contain that word or not? If so, how do I mimic this font as best I can? So there may end up being some subtle differences in the fonts from your graphic design to your web page, because in a graphic design, it's a matter of what's on your system. On a web page, the fonts you have to be concerned about is what are the fonts on the user's system. and we can't control that. So any font, such as this one, that we want to make sure it's exactly identical to our graphic design, we need to make it an image. So this upper area is going to be an image. The rest of the text on my web page here in my graphic design, I should be able to closely mimic those fonts because they're not that fancy or complicated. Notice they're black or white. They're pretty basic, uppercase or not, and they might not look quite as fancy as this page does, but we can pretty closely mimic them and make sure that every user who looks at our web page has that particular font to give our design a look. So it's not a perfect, this is always going to be Minion Pro in my header, this is always going to be Myriad Pro in my navigation bar. As soon as it's text on the page, I have to make sure that every user has the font we're going to display. That's a part of the conversion process that we need to determine in terms of, okay, how sophisticated is the font? And is it going to destroy the design if we change fonts? If it's not exactly perfect, well, this would certainly change our logo. So that one has to stay. So I'll make this an image. The rest of these are so comparable to a web font that we should be able to create them on the web page so that every user has a font that looks similar to this one so that the page design is not ruined just because of the font. So we don't have as much control over specific fonts on the web, and that's a part of the website that can tend to be a bit tricky. So we'll be making a decision in terms of fonts, taking these fonts from our style guide and figuring out for the web what font we can substitute so that everybody's system would have this font. And if we don't want to do that, we need to convert it to an image. So just a subtle difference between the graphic side of working with fonts and the web side of working with fonts. Moving forward in the future, we should have a lot more control over fonts on the web, but right now we cannot control the way you can in a graphic design program. So we will put that into our planning process, figuring out what fonts we can use. Welcome to the world of web typography.